Well, we're all good. Let's welcome in Mike Greenberg into the show. Numbers they own. So Perloff's going to want every number to be a Philadelphia-based athlete or something. How did you approach it, local versus, entire sports scene?
Well, we tried very hard. First of all, thank you guys for having me on, and I hope you can hear me well. I know the delay was in trying to get our audio working well. Here's the one thing I can tell you, Andrew, is that the person who worked on this book with me, Paul Hembekides, who everyone calls Hembo, is also from Philadelphia. So if there was any bias, it was going to swing in your direction. I'm looking over the list of all the numbers here, and I'm trying to see how Philadelphia slanted it would be. The Philadelphia sports scene is reasonably well represented. But the answer to your question, Maggie, is I tried very hard not to allow it to influence me at all. My two primary influences, if you will, have been New York and Chicago. I was born and raised in New York City, and then I moved to Chicago to go to college, and I stayed there, and I lived and worked there for 11 years, and it still sort of feels like a second home to me. So my knowledge of the New York and Chicago athletes probably is greater than it is of other places, but I tried very hard not to allow that to have really any bearing on any of the decisions that we made.
Mike, I want to make something clear. I'm a Hembo fan, number one. Every time on Get Up, when Hembo's quizzing Graziano and the guys and trying to stump them, always rooting for Hembo because I was a researcher back in the day, too. And I'm so glad he's part of this project. But how much work was there at the later numbers where you don't have the quarterback jersey numbers and sort of as you get, above 50, there aren't necessarily noteworthy stats. Was there a lot more work on certain numbers, especially the later part of the 0 to 100?
Right. So let me explain what we did because the idea originated from the jersey numbers. So we were sitting around one day after Get Up, and the conversation, because we are just a bunch of sports nerds, turned to how many Hall of Fame quarterbacks all wore the jersey number 12. Right. Namath, Staubach, Bradshaw, Greasy, Stabler, Jim Kelly, and then eventually Brady and Rodgers. This is the sort of thing we find interesting. And someone in the room said to me, Greeny, sure, they all wore number 12, but who owns the number 12? And the reason I've never written a sports book before is that I never had a good enough idea. I couldn't think of anything that I thought was interesting enough to carry an entire book. In that moment, a light bulb went off my head, and I called Hembo on my drive home that day, and I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to figure out who owns every number in sports history from 1 to 100. You're going to do the research. I'm going to do the writing. And the next thing you know, here we are. So when we first sat down, my idea was we'll just assign jersey numbers. The problem is I immediately said to Hembo, are we about to do a book of the greatest athletes and legends in sports history that doesn't include Muhammad Ali and Serena Williams and Tiger Woods and all these people who play sports that don't have jersey numbers attached to them? So Perloff, the point here is we then came up with ways of attaching these numbers to other people. So we were never at any point, it was actually much harder deciding which people weren't going to make the book. We decided we were going to find ways to get almost all of the legends you would expect, a book that we wanted to feel like sort of the definitive list of the 100 greatest legends of all time. It wouldn't work if you didn't have Muhammad Ali in it. And it wouldn't work. And look, I mean, someone like LeBron James, for example, LeBron James has worn 2 jersey numbers in his NBA career. One of them was 23. The other one was 6. We couldn't give him either of those numbers. So we had to invent numbers, come up with logical ways to assign those numbers to other people. So rather than it being hard to find someone to slot into number 76, the challenge was actually the other way, figuring out who was going to get omitted.
Mike Greenberg is our guest. He's got a new book out called Got Your Number, The Greatest Sports Legends and the Numbers They Own. We also mentioned, Greeny, just some of the things you're doing today or in the next couple days. Get Up, NBA tonight, obviously NBA Countdown. You've got the draft coming up. You're going to be in Kansas City. So will we. You are a New York Times bestselling author. You already mentioned that. And you're in the Radio Hall of Fame. I think I covered everything. So not to ask you what was the hardest one or what was the easiest number to come up with, but which one are you most proud made it into the book?
That's a great question. The one I think I like the best is 60. So I grew up a tennis player and a tennis fan. Tennis was a true love of mine growing up in the 70s. And the number 60 in our book is shared by Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova, because it has always been my belief that that is the greatest rivalry in the history of sports, and it's not even close. And if you read the chapter, you will see the case that I make. If you add together the total number of games that Magic Johnson and Larry Bird played against each other, add to that the number of rounds Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier fought against each other, that number would not equal the number of times that Chris Evert played Martina Navratilova in the finals of an event alone. They met in 60 finals, which is ridiculous and a number that will never be approached. And it happened over a span of 12 years in which one or the other of them was ranked number one in the world every single time. It is an absolute no-brainer to say that it had not been for the other, either of them would now be considered the greatest player that ever lived. They would have infinitely more slams than Margaret Court or anyone else does. But they had each other, and they are the greatest rivals, in my opinion, in the history of sports. And their relationship has been fascinating to me over the years. When at the peak of their rivalry, much as was the case with Magic and Larry, I don't think they could have been friends. I think it would have been impossible to be friends because their rivalry was so incredibly fierce and motivated them both. But the way they appreciate each other today, the way they understand, much as Magic and Larry have come to do, the way they appreciate what each of them meant to the other and will continue to until the end of time is something that I find just psychologically fascinating. So we decided to give them that number together, because while each of them is individually worthy of having a number in the book, I thought it was appropriate that they sort of be remembered together forever, because that's the way I think they will always be remembered.
Mike, I can't wait to dive into this and give it to my father on Father's Day. I'm curious, you're used to radio and when you can get people arguing and debating. It's a book. What happens when you're reading it and you want to argue with one of the numbers on here? What are you going to tell people to do?
Tweet at me or something. We've certainly had plenty of that. What I will tell you guys, though, I don't know if you grew up the way I did, but I grew up reading a lot of sports history. Mm-hmm. So to me, the debate piece of this book is why it has gotten all of the attention that it's gotten and got on the Times list and all of that stuff, because people want to argue about who we chose at 21, which was a very tough choice between Roberto Clemente, Deion Sanders, and Tim Duncan, who we chose at 4, which is Lou Gehrig, Brett Favre, and Bobby Orr, and some of the other really tough ones. Those are fun, and that's, candidly, it's what all of us do for a living at the end of the day. We debate over sports opinions. But what I will promise anyone interested in this book is that whether you agree or disagree with the positions that we took, because Hembo's research is so extraordinary, that the book to me is more about sports history than it is about anything else. You will learn at least 100 facts. You will learn 100 things about sports history you did not know, I promise, no matter how knowledgeable a sports fan you are, because even in the chapters about the best known people, Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, Serena Williams, Hembo found stuff that people will not otherwise know. And I think that sports history piece is important, and it's being lost. Like, I'll give you an example. Nothing drives me crazier than when I am listening to a sports show and I hear a professional sportscaster say, well, I don't really know much about Oscar Robertson. He was before my time. Oh, is that a fact? If you were listening to a political talk show and the guy on there said, I don't know much about FDR, he was president before my time, you would immediately stop listening to this person because he's an idiot, because there's no way to understand, to be able to put into context the things that we are currently chronicling without understanding at least some level of the historical context behind them. So to me, the debate piece of the book is one thing, and I think that's what is first attracting people to it. But the reason I think people have reacted to it the way they have has been because of the history part of it. And that's the part I'm actually the most excited about.
Mike Greenberg is our guest. The new book is called Got Your Number, The Greatest Sports Legends and the Numbers They Own. Also, Greeny, I mean, YouTube now. There's no excuse. You can go back and watch anything. I'm watching Hagler Hearns rounds the other day. Okay, take us like fly on the wall. I'm just going to paint a little hypothetical for you. I'm not trying to cause you any pain. This is just a hypothetical.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're sitting up, on the set, draft night. Everyone's excited. The glitz, the glam. Greeny's up there. You got the whole thing. You get it. Your producer in the ear. We got some breaking news. Aaron Rodgers has been traded to the 49ers. What's going on? Actually, I would be a fly on the wall. I'm going to be watching this at my couch. Yes.
So when they first approached me about doing the draft 2.5 years ago, however long ago it was, I said, before they could say it to me, I totally get that this is not my show, right? That people tune into my shows in theory because they want to hear what I have to say about things. No one is watching the draft besides maybe my wife and my mother because I'm doing it, right? Everyone else is watching because they want to see what winds up happening, and they want to hear from Mel, and they want to hear from Lewis and from Booker McFarland and everybody else. So I totally understand that this is not about what I think. If the Rodgers thing goes one way or the other on my watch, meaning while we're on, it's going to be a real test of my professionalism. And here's what I do not think there's any chance that he winds up being traded to someone else during the draft. Here's what I do think is possible, or here's what I will say to you, that I don't think the first night is critical. I do the first 2 nights. I do Thursday and Friday, so rounds 1, 2, and 3. The Jets have consecutive picks midway through the second round. If the Jets make both of those picks, I believe it will be impossible for me to hide my concern because the moment those 2 picks get made and the Jets make them and they haven't been traded to Green Bay, now the timing of this completely changes. Now this goes from something where I believe there is more urgency on the Packers to get this done to something where there is zero urgency for the Packers to get this done. At that point, they're not worried about it until literally week 1 of the regular season, because that's when they owe him all the money that they owe him. And in fact, it is financially advantageous to them to not do this until June 2nd, as I'm sure you guys have covered ad nauseum. So the point is, I believe it is incumbent on the Packers to get this done, and I believe it will. Like, as pessimistic a person as I am, I do believe it will. Before those second-round picks are made. I don't think the Jets' first pick is going into this trade. So I don't think Thursday night, the 13th pick in the draft, that to me is not the line of demarcation. The line of demarcation, I don't have the order in front of me, but wherever it is the Jets pick back-to-back, it's somewhere in the 40s, I want to say. Wherever those 2 go, boom, boom. If those picks get made and the Jets make them, I'm not going to be excited about them no matter who they are. Because all of a sudden, the possibility of opening the season with Zach Wilson at quarterback becomes increasingly real. And that is a reality no one should be interested in.
Real quick, Mike, do you think there's any reason we should talk about Lamar Jackson or Plan B or maybe even drafting somebody at 13? Or you're confident that that's not even going to come up?
Well, I think I'm confident that they're confident. People sometimes perceive me to know much more about the Jets than I do. I'm not an insider. I'm just a fan. But what I do is I stalk all the insiders. So I'm constantly texting with Rich Cimini, and that's how I first met Kimberly Martin, long before she came to ESPN. She covered the Jets for Newsday, and so, our relationship goes back to that. So I am constantly in touch with them, and all of them continuously tell me that the Jets remain 100% steadfastly confident that this trade is going to happen. I do not believe that the name Lamar Jackson has been raised at the Jets facility. I do not think the idea of drafting Hendon Hooker or should Will Levis fall to 13, drafting him, I don't think those things have even been broached. The Jets will take an offensive tackle at 13 to protect Aaron Rodgers, and I believe they are positive that they will get him. Now, they've been positive of a lot of things in the 55 years of my life that haven't worked out. So I suppose nothing is guaranteed until it happens. But my answer to your question is, I don't think that has come up because I think they're positive it's not going to be necessary.
Listen, for the sake of everybody, maybe the Jets can just sit this next couple drafts out with drafting quarterbacks. You know, it hasn't really gone that well. Multiple general managers, multiple coaches. Just, what do they say? Sit these next couple plays out. I think it's best, you know?
We have taken quarterbacks in the top 3 twice in the last 5 years. One of them is bad. The other one might actually be the worst player ever. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think everyone should feel that way. Look, that's why I was so in favor of this Rodgers thing from the beginning, for all of the risk that is involved. I have all these Jet fans telling me, Greeny, aren't you worried about this, that, and the other? Yes, I am. But what is the alternative? Draft somebody else? Everything we have tried. We have been trying to get the quarterback position right since we took Richard Todd, number 6 overall, in 1976. And you know what? We suck at it. We need to do something different. Go get a guy we know is great. And that's what I believe they're going to do.
Honestly, I've never heard a coach tell one of their star players, or presumed stars, go read a book. I've never heard it before. Never heard it. Go read Greeny's book, though. Got Your Number, The Greatest Sports Legends and the Numbers They Own. Greeny, we know this is a really busy time of year. Thanks so much for doing this. Good luck with the NBA countdown tonight, with the draft next week, and everything in the book. Congrats.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. I hope we can do it again.